Hello everyone, and welcome to my B&B Fan Club channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Bridget Forrester stood in the antiseptic lab, shivering as she grasped the DNA test results. The weight of the truth slammed against her chest, a smothering force that made breathing difficult. The results were clear. Luna, the lively young lady who had become a staple in their life, was not who she claimed to be. The test revealed she was not connected to Will Spencer, the guy Bridget had watched grow from a boy to a gentle, trusting soul who deserved better than the web of lies that surrounded him. However, Bridget was all too aware that the truth could destroy him. It may destabilize the fragile equilibrium he'd worked so hard to establish in the tumultuous world of the Forrester and Spencer families. So, she made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. She would falsify the DNA findings to spare Will from the tragic reality of Luna's deception. The lab was quiet save for the gentle hum of machinery and the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Bridget's white coat felt heavier than normal, as if it bore the weight of her decision. She looked at the computer screen, which displayed the actual results in crisp black and white. Luna's DNA did not match the Spencer line. The ramifications were staggering. Luna had been lying about her identity, weaving herself into Will's life with such accuracy that Bridget's skin crawled. But Will adored her. He trusted her. His heart, already scarred from years of family strife and treachery, had found refuge in Luna's company. If Bridget disclosed the truth, he would be devastated. She couldn't take seeing him broken again. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. It would be so simple to change the data, replacing the results with a fake match. She had the expertise, access, and motivation. As a doctor, she had pledged to do no harm, but what did it entail in this situation? Was it more destructive to let Will dwell in blissful ignorance, or to shatter his delusion and leave him reeling? Bridget's mind raced with images of Will as a child, his wide, trusting eyes, his laughter, and the way he clung to her during their family's scandalous years. She had always been his defender and safe harbor. This was no different, she reminded herself. It was about saving him. With a deep breath, she started typing. Her fingers moved rapidly, manipulating the genetic markers and crafting a fake narrative that connected Luna to the Spencer family. Each keystroke seemed like a breach of her own morality, but she buried the shame under her love for Will. She promised herself it was just temporary, that she'd find a way to discover Luna's genuine motives and deal with them gently, without including Will in the mess. For the time being, the phony results would buy her time. Time to protect him and figure out what Luna actually wanted. As she saved the file, a tear ran down her cheek. She hastily wiped it away, looking around to make sure no one had noticed. The lab technicians were preoccupied with their stations, unaware of the moral fight raging within her. Bridget printed the fabricated report, her hands calm and certain in her decision. She placed the paper into a folder and proceeded to the Forrester mansion, where Will and Luna were awaiting the results. As usual, there was a bustle of activity at the mansion. The Forresters were no strangers to drama, and today was no exception. Steffi and Hope were squabbling in the living room about a design issue, their voices shrill and piercing. Rich stood by the hearth, scratching his temples, plainly fatigued from the incessant confrontations. Will sat on the couch with Luna alongside him, their hands interlaced. The sight of them together made Bridget's stomach turn. Luna's smile was warm and almost too perfect as she leaned against Will, her dark hair flowing over one shoulder. She seemed like a loyal companion, but Bridget knew better. She had to. Bridget. Will's face brightened up when he spotted her. He stood, bringing Luna with him. Did you get the results? Bridget faked a grin as her heart pounded. I do. She handed him the folder, her fingers resting on it for longer than necessary. Will opened the folder, scanning the page. Everything's in there. Luna looked over his shoulder, her expression unreadable. So is it official? Will inquired, his tone tinted with hope. Is Luna a Spencer? Bridget nodded, a lie burning in her throat. Yes. Will let out a relieved laugh and drew Luna into a hug. I knew it, he said softly, his voice thick with sorrow. I knew you were one of us. Luna threw her arms around him. Yet her gaze met Bridget's over his shoulder. That gaze was calculated, and it made Bridget's blood run cold. She glanced away, unable to bear Luna's stare, and pretended to check her phone while fiddling with her purse. The remainder of the day was a blur. The family celebrated the news by toasting Luna's official place in the Spencer bloodline. Bridget watched from the sidelines, her heart heavy with her secret. She convinced herself she'd done the right thing, that protecting Will was worth it. However, as the days passed into weeks, the falsehood began to fester. Luna's confidence rose, as did her influence over Will. She was always present, whispering in his ear, directing his decisions, and gently steering him away from his family. Bridget observed the changes, Will's detachment from her, his father, and everyone who had once been his anchor. She began to explore Luna in private, delving into her past in quest of any hints to her true identity. The more she learned, the more uneasy she became. Luna's records were scant, nearly spotless, as if someone had gone to tremendous lengths to obliterate her past. There were gaps, missing years, ambiguous allusions to foster homes, and no clear ties to any family. Bridget's medical background had made her analytical, but her mother's instincts propelled her to keep going, even when the trail went dead. One night, she found herself alone in the lab, going over old papers. She had tracked down a long-lost contact, a former foster care worker who had known Luna for years. The woman's voice seemed hesitant over the phone, and her words were guarded. Luna was different, she had stated. Although charming, there was always something amiss. She'd approach them, win their trust, and then, things happened. Money would go missing, and relationships would collapse. She was skilled at hiding her tracks. Bridget's heart fell. She had hoped for answers, but they simply reinforced her worst fears. Luna was more than simply a liar. She was dangerous. Luna was now more closely involved in Will's life than ever before as a result of Bridget's deception. The guilt was crushing. Bridget couldn't sleep or eat. She saw Will's face in her nightmares, and his trust in her was broken when he realized the reality. She had intended to protect him, but had she instead turned him over to a predator? The thought made her ill. She considered coming clean and telling Will everything, but each time she practiced the words she faltered. How could she explain this? How could she rationalize violating his trust, even if it meant saving him? Weeks stretched into months, and Luna tightened her grasp on Will. He proposed to her in a spectacular, romantic gesture that the entire family enjoyed, except Bridget. She stood at the engagement party, a glass of champagne still in her hand, watching Luna grin and accept the ring. The party was filled with laughter and excitement, but all Bridget could hear was the ticking of a clock, counting down the minutes until her lie came tumbling down. She started to plot. She couldn't erase the forged DNA findings without losing Will's faith, but she could expose Luna without revealing her own dishonesty. She hired a private investigator who was discreet and didn't ask too many questions. She gave them just enough information to get them started, taking care not to reveal too much. The investigator was diligent, discovering details about Luna's past that formed a terrifying picture. She'd been tied to scams in several places, usually using different names and leaving a trail of shattered hearts and empty bank accounts. Bridget realized she was running out of time. The wedding was coming, and Luna was pressuring Will to engage in a business venture, which Bridget feared was a front for something considerably more evil. She worked tirelessly, gathering information and crafting a case that would force Luna to identify herself while without exposing Bridget's deception. It was a delicate balance that kept her awake at night, racing through worst-case possibilities. One evening, while she sat in her office, the investigator called with an important discovery. He had discovered a witness, someone who had known Luna from one of her previous scams. The witness agreed to speak, but only in person and if Bridget could ensure their safety. It was risky, but Bridget was desperate. She planned to meet the witness in a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe, away from the prying eyes of Los Angeles. The meeting was strained. The witness, Claire, a nervous woman, talked quietly, her gaze darting about the room. She informed Bridget about Luna's history, how she had duped an affluent family, emptied their bank accounts, and vanished before anybody could apprehend her. Claire was a family friend who became embroiled in the aftermath when Luna's falsehoods came to light. "She's not just a liar," Claire said quietly. "She is dangerous. She doesn't care who she hurts as long as she gets her way." Bridget's heart beat as she listened. She knew Luna was trouble, but this was more than she had expected. She thanked Claire and promised to keep her safe, then left the cafe with a newfound sense of urgency. She needed to act now. Back in Los Angeles, Bridget approached Luna. It was a premeditated maneuver, one she'd mentally practiced 100 times. Bridget summoned Luna to her office under the premise of discussing wedding plans. But when they were alone, she lay out the proof. She kept her voice quiet and her tone professional, but she was shaking inside. "I know who you are," she replied, sliding a packet across the desk. "And I know what you've done." Luna's smile remained unwavering, but her gaze darkened. "I don't know what you're talking about, Bridget." "Don't play games with me," she said. "I have proof. Witnesses, documents, everything. You are not a Spencer, and you never were. You've been lying to Will, to all of us." Luna remained silent for a minute. Then, to Bridget's surprise, she laughed, a chilly, mirthless sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You're one to talk about lying," Luna replied, leaning forward. "How do you think Will would react if he knew what you did? What if he knew you fabricated the DNA results?" Bridget froze. She had been so meticulous and convinced that no one would know. But Luna's words sliced through her like a knife. "You don't have proof," she responded, her voice barely audible. "Don't I?" Luna smiled wider. "You aren't as intelligent as you think, Bridget. I have been watching you. I know what you did, and I understand why. You're afraid of losing him. But here's the thing. If you expose me, I will bring you down with me. Who do you think will believe? Who lied to him? His fiancée or his sister?" Bridget's world tilted. She had underestimated Luna and the depths of her cunning. For the first time, she realized she might lose this struggle. Luna had her caught, with a noose around her neck. If she continued, she risked losing Will forever. If she did nothing, Luna would annihilate him. The days that followed were torturous. Bridget struggled with her conscience, split between her feelings for Will and the possibility of losing him. She watched Luna continue to captivate the family, her lies becoming bolder and her schemes more hazardous. The wedding drew closer, and with it the awareness that Luna's endgame was near. Bridget made a snap decision out of desperation. She would tell Will the truth, not about the DNA results, but about Luna's background. She'd show him the evidence and let him decide for himself. It was a risk, but it was the only way to save him while preserving their link. She summoned him to her office, her hands shaking as she arranged the files, photos, and witness statements. Will listened in quiet, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he stared at her with pain in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I wanted to protect you," Bridget explained, tears running down her cheeks. "I thought I could handle it without hurting you." Will stood up, his shoulders fell. "I need time," he murmured and walked out. The wedding was called off. Luna vanished, leaving a trail of allegations and broken trust. Will didn't talk to Bridget for weeks, and the stillness between them was a gaping hole. She wasn't sure if he would ever forgive her, or if she would ever forgive herself. The deception she told to save him had cost her everything, including her brother, peace, and sense of self. Bridget would sit alone in the quiet moments, when the mansion was empty and the world was peaceful, feeling the weight of her decisions on her. She had meant to shield Will from pain, but in the end, she had just exacerbated it. The truth, she understood, was a two-edged blade, and no matter how gently she wielded it, someone was always injured. Bridget sat in a quiet room off the lab, her scalp tingling as she reviewed the paternity kit instructions. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and plastic, the sterile odor reminding her of all the lives she had touched, of all the times she had attempted to expose the truth. But now the truth felt like a double-edged sword. Katie had asked Bridget to administer this test, and everyone trusted she would be fair. Nobody realized that a tempest was brewing behind Dr. Bridget Forrester's calm, determined countenance. She recalled Will's earnestness and idealistic nature, and how he believed in doing the right thing even when it was difficult. He had already been drawn into Luna's maelstrom, through no fault of his own. Bridget had watched him struggle, and Luna's assertion that the unborn kid was his shattered his peace. If the test revealed that Will was the father, he'd be tied for life, not only to Luna, but also to the accusations, gossip, and judgment. He'd be bonded to that child indefinitely, whether he was ready or not. She also reflected on Luna. How crafty, manipulative, and confident she was. Luna was convinced Will was the baby's father. She had no reason to mistrust it, or so she said. However, Bridget was aware of how easy DNA findings might be falsified with. If anyone had a motivation, it was Luna or those close to her. Katie had insisted that Bridget do the test so that it could not be manipulated by Luna, Lee, or anyone else. Bridget had committed herself to integrity and the belief that she would do the right thing. But what did right mean? Were they merely stating the truth? Or was it to save Will from a fate he did not deserve? Katie had contacted her, her voice strained, stating she needed to make sure this test couldn't be manipulated. Only Bridget would handle it. Katie believed her implicitly. To violate that trust would be a betrayal of Katie, Bill, and the family. Nonetheless, Bridget felt a horrible struggle in her heart. She inhaled, calming her worries. The machines in the lab next door blinked silently. She'd have access to the sample. She would have the ability to choose which way the findings would appear. She may introduce a variant, a false negative, or a misleading conclusion. She could free Will from the burden of paternity. But at what cost? To her conscience? To Will if he ever found it? She imagined Luna walking down the corridor, sure, perhaps even arrogant, that the baby was Will's. The talk in the mansion, as well as Luna's insistence on outcomes, gave her a sense of her certainty. If Bridget told the truth, Luna's victory would be complete. And Will's world would be altered forever. The blowback would be huge. But if Bridget told a falsehood, it would be too heavy for her heart. Even still, the decision weighed heavily on her mind. She would falsify the results. Not because she was weak or corrupt, but because she thought she was picking the lesser evil. She was confident she could save Will from Luna's web. She believed she could keep a man she respected from being forced into a life he had never asked for. Over the next few hours, she labored with precision. She followed the protocol but made little changes, an innocuous margin of error, a manipulated control. She changed the readouts so that the test revealed that Will was not the father. She filled out the paperwork, signed her name, and calibrated the machine output. As she replaced the sample container labels, she felt an icy wave of shame mixed with determination.